kind of problems that you're going to have to do on the assignment. So it's going to look like something like this. I'll just do this exact one. It says plot all of the existing 5 features. So remember, those 5 features are the vertical asymptotes, the horizontal asymptotes, the x-intercepts, the y-intercepts, and any holes that might exist. So we're going to plot all those things. And some may not be there, right? I mean, some of them might not be there, but we're going to figure out if they're there. And then what we're going to do is, if we get a fraction or a decimal, we're just going to put it as close to that true location as possible and then go from there. So I'm going to cover that up a little bit, but I'm going to keep it on there. So here's the equation. So we got this equation that's f of x equals 5x over 4x plus 14. So the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the x-intercepts. Okay? So when I think about the x-intercepts, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So when it's crossing the x-axis, y is equal to 0. So what we really want to figure out is, when is the top equal to 0? So we need to figure out when 5x is equal to 0. Well, that happens when x equals 0. So the x-intercept is the point 0, 0. That's the point of our x-intercept. So now, it's the first part. We'll get to graphing it in just a second after we get all the information. Next thing I want to know is, what's the y-intercept? And again, the y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. So when we have this, we need to put 0 in for x. And if we do that, we'd have y is equal to 5 times 0 divided by 4 times 0 plus 14. Well, what we end up with is 0. So now we have this point, 0, 0 again. So that happens to be the y-intercept, which should make sense because notice that both x and y are 0 in there. Okay, so we got that done. So now let's go to the next thing that I think is the easiest thing to do. And let's look at the horizontal asymptotes. Well, let me respell that. Okay. So as far as horizontal asymptotes go, notice that the degree on the top is 1. Okay. Degree on the top is equal to 1. That's the highest power of x. And the degree on the bottom equals 1. If you look back at your notes, when they're the same on the top and the bottom, then it's the number that's in front of the highest power. So our horizontal asymptote is y is equal to, remember it's horizontal, so it's going to be y equals 5 divided by 4. Well, 5 divided by 4 is somewhere like 1 1/4. Okay, so it's a little bit bigger than 1. That's where we're gonna put it, is a little bigger than 1. Okay. Now we're going to talk about vertical asymptotes on this one. So let's look at the vertical asymptotes. If you look back at your notes, what you want to do is you want to make the bottom equal to 0. And if we do that, we have 4x plus 14 equals 0. If we solve this, 4x is equal to negative 14. So x is equal to negative 14 divided by 4. Well, if you think about negative 14 divided by 4, that's like negative 2 1/2. Okay, so that's like negative 3 1/2. Sorry, negative 3 1/2. Okay, and you could figure that out if you want. If you didn't know how to work with that off of fractions, you certainly could use a calculator on that. Now, the last thing is the wholes. So what we'd like to do is factor it. Well, this is already factored. And there is no common factor. So since there's no common factor, there are no wholes. So since there's no common factor, there's no wholes. So let's look back at all the things we have and let's start to, and we'll graph them. So the first thing, if you go here, if you look back to what we have, put it on like this, is, and it's going to be hard because I'm going to keep on clicking back. So the X-intercept is, so if I click on the X-intercept, you'll get a little point. I can drag that point to my X-intercept, which was 0, 0. The Y-intercept, I can drag that point to 0, 0. So I drag both Y-intercept and X-intercepts to 0, 0 because that's what I found. Horizontal asymptote and vertical asymptote, because remember on this one there wasn't any holes. So the horizontal asymptote, if I click on horizontal, what happens is this dotted line shows up, because remember a horizontal asymptote is like a ceiling. In our case, our horizontal asymptote was 1 1/4. So if I bring it down to 1 1/4, it'd be like right there. It's pretty close. That's about 1 1/4 right there. And then if I click the vertical asymptote, the vertical asymptote was negative 3 1/2. So if I go to negative 3 1/2, I'm going to put it right about there. And now if I graph this, it should go through this point, and it should look like one of those flippity curves. So I'm going to plot the rational function on this. Looks like that. That's what I want to submit. I'm going to submit that answer and hopefully get the green dot. There it is, the green check, there it is. And it goes through, and it'll go through all the different things. It may not go in the same order that I did it in, but it still goes in the same things. Okay, so let's look at one more example. So let me get a new problem. Let me get one that I can actually factor, because that'll help me with getting a whole. So give me a second. Here's one. So this is the next one that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do all the same things on it. So the first thing that I'm going to do on this is I am going to figure out the X and the Y intercept. So the X-intercept. Okay, remember that the X-intercept, that's when this thing equals 0. So our X-intercept is when we have an X-intercept. Remember, the X-intercept, Y is going to equal 0. So we need the top equal to 0. So in this case, we need 3x minus 6 equal to 0, and then let's solve it. So we get 3x is equal to 2. We get our 6. So x is equal to 2. So we got an X-intercept at 2, 0. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Now, let's look at the Y-intercept. Remember, in the Y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So if we put 0 in for this, we're going to say y is equal to 3 times 0 minus 6 over 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 8. So we got negative 6 over negative 8. A negative over negative is a positive. If I reduce this, notice that 2 goes into each of these, so we get 3 divided by 4. So our y-intercept is 0, 3/4. Okay, so now let's look at our horizontal asymptote. Notice that on this one, the degree on the top is equal to 1. but the degree on the bottom is equal to 2. So the top degree is smaller than the bottom degree, which makes our horizontal asymptote y equals 0. Okay? Now, the last thing, or the last two things we're going to do is the horizontal, or the vertical asymptote and the hole. But what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take and I'm going to factor the equation. I'm going to factor the top and the bottom. So if I factor the top and the bottom, notice that on the top I can pull out a 3. So if I pull out a 3, I get x minus 2. And if I factor the bottom, notice that if I factor this bottom, I would get x plus 4 times x minus 2. If you forgot how to factor, go back and look at that assignment, but you'll get something like this. Now here's an important piece, because remember, the whole is when there's a common factor. So there's a common factor at 2. So we know that there is a whole when x is equal to 2, because the top would equal 0 if we plug 2 in, and the bottom would equal 0 when we plug 2 in. So we're going to have a whole when x equals 2. If we think about what happens on this, when we factor this, the key is, the good thing about factoring is if you have this and you can cross those out, then what we can do is we can plug that 2 in and we can say, okay, well, what if we plug 2 in and we get y is equal to 3 divided by 2 plus 4, so 3 divided by 6 is going to be our whole. 3 over 6 is a lot like 1/2. So there's a whole at 2 comma 1/2. Now, our vertical asymptote is when the bottom equals 0 but the top does not equal to 0. Well, notice now that we have this factored equation. So our vertical asymptote is going to be when x plus 4 is equal to 0. So when x is equal to negative 4. That's going to be our vertical asymptote. So we have all the things that we need. And I'm going to have to jump back and forth, but I'm going to go through all the things. So vertical asymptote, I just did that one, so let's put that one in there. Vertical asymptote, x is equal to negative 4. I'll drag this vertical asymptote over to negative 4, and we'll go back. Let's look at our whole. If I did that right, our whole is at 2 and then 1/2. Let me make sure I did something here. I'm going to have to think about what I did. I might have made a mistake on this, so I'll look back at it. The horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. So I click on horizontal asymptote, y equals 0. It's going to be right there. Our y-intercept is 0 and 3/4. So our y-intercept is 0 and 3/4. Now this will work out. 0, 3/4 is going to be like right there roughly. And then finally, our x-intercept, which is what we started out, was 2, 0. But notice that 2, 0 is right there. That's right on that. That's right on the horizontal asymptote. So we're not going to put a dot there because I think they'll probably frown at us if we do. If I put the horizontal asymptote there, let me put the intercept right here. They may count that wrong because that's really on an asymptote. So keep that in mind, that I don't think that that exists. If that existed, that would be part of the graph. So we're just going to click on it and we're going to get rid of that intercept. And we're going to plot that. Notice it goes through those and it looks like that shape that we need. So now if I submit this answer, hopefully I've done everything right, and there it is. And so I went through all of those steps and all those things and I plotted all those things. You got about 4 problems to do. I'll help you if you need help.